Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dad Hat. Our guest today is homesteader, author, and entrepreneur Luke Tatum. Hey, Luke, how are you?
Hey, doing great, Lee. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so happy to have you. Some of the concepts that I've been reading on your website and through your book are so interesting and so valuable. But first, I want to hear about your core values a little bit. It seems that a lot of your values are based around minimal government and maximum freedom. Is that true? And why is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Man, I tell you what, I'm one of those that came into all this with an intellectual angle. And so I, was bored out of my mind, like in school growing up and stuff. And then I discovered eventually the Austrian School of Economics, got really, really into that. I mean, that's boring to a lot of folks, and I get that. But it isn't boring to me, and I just have completely and totally submerged myself in that world for years now. And so, people who can see video like behind me, that's a lot of Austrian econ books and things that read all those, and revisit a lot of those concepts. And so I just really, really love that. And one of the lessons you learn, like Austrian economics is just economics. It doesn't tell you shouldn't have a government, right? But one of the things you can kind of deduce from the like inefficiencies and different things that are, in those books is that the world would probably function a whole lot better with a lot less government, right? And I'm being a little bit facetious, and tongue in cheek, but that's really the truth, man. Like there's just so many things where life could be a lot better. And so I guess that's my very surface level answer to that question.
And why is that? Why is a limited government or a smaller government more effective? Is it bureaucracy? Is it all the admin costs? What is it?
Well, I mean, it's all of those things, right? And that's probably a book all unto itself, I would say. But you think about charity just as an example. So charity work, private charities, they take in a lot of money. They spend a lot of money. Sometimes they pay a pretty big salary to their, executives and their higher ups in the organization. But if you look at like the actual amount that goes to individual people, when we're talking about the government trying to be charitable, trying to do good things for people that, have a need, we're talking about 3%, 2% of the money is going to the actual people who need it, if that, and that's even debatable, right, if they're even helping in the right way. There's bureaucracy that absorbs a lot of those things, but then there's also like this certain element of the government is just a black hole for money. It absorbs money, everything it touches, and you just kind of like don't know anymore where it went. It's like, it's just part of the budget that we don't know where some of the money goes is honestly how some of these things work. I'm not going to start, quoting the budgets from certain departments or what have you, but it gets pretty bad.
Yeah. Lots of people know the story about San Francisco and their homeless problem. And you hear all the time, politicians talk about how much they spent on the homeless problem in San Francisco and Los Angeles and all those places. But yet homelessness is still running rampant. And then you realize how little money actually got to helping those homeless people get out of their current situation. And that's a tragic story right there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you want to look at any problem like that. Milton Friedman, right, has that great quote, "There's nothing so permanent as a temporary government program," right? So you have this just insane level of, if the government creates an agency to solve a problem, the problem will never go away. It's going to probably get worse over time. Department of Education, the minimum wage, like whatever you look at, you've got that factor at work. It varies in degree, but I mean, it's a prevalent, ever present factor. And so if you want to solve a problem, I mean, the flip side of this conversation is if you want to solve a problem, you don't create a government agency. You find, private, like direct contract ways to solve the issue. And I mean, it's like blatantly true when you have a certain level of understanding, once you've looked into some of these things. But, the analysis doesn't fit on a bumper sticker. And so it's just not something that gets shared around. It's not something that the media and the agencies that kind of benefit from having these problems exist are going to promote. Because like, just give us a bigger budget this year and we're going to take care of it. And it's like, you keep saying that. And 100 years into some of these programs, like, okay, well, just give us a bigger budget and we're going to solve it this time for sure. Right. It's almost like a presidential campaign every year for the budgets.
Yeah. We're talking about Austrian economics time preference. How much, the president's got 4 years, maybe 8 years to make all these big changes. And is that really a good strategy to hold him to 4 or 8 years to solve these major societal problems? I don't know. Personally, I'm not definitely not smart enough to give you any answer there. But here's another thing. My dad's a baby boomer, and I hear my dad say this all the time. The government is a business. And it makes me cringe because I'm like, well, if that's the case, they have to be the worst business ever that just keeps getting funded. Do I have the right outlook on that?
Oh, absolutely, man. My background is, among other things, I've done a bunch of random things before settling into my career that I'm in. But I used to be in retail. And so, I was a middle manager and I was a team lead and I was in customer service and I did all these retail things. And like when you start to get a little higher up the ladder on some of these things, you have to think like as a business owner. It's not like, how can I make a commission today? It's, how do we balance the fact that we're paying commissions, the fact that we've got all this, logistical expense, the fact that we've got to air condition this 20,000 square foot display floor. It was furniture retail, so it was a pretty big space. And, it's like, yeah, okay, all this money flows through the doors or, into the business on a weekly basis, but are we actually making any money? It gets a little tighter. And so what do you have to do? You can't just go, okay, metropolitan area surrounding the store, we are trying to provide you a great service and you're just not spending enough. So we really need you to increase our budget this year. I mean, like this doesn't even make any sense. I'm having a hard time constructing a good metaphor out of it because it's so like on its face, not how it works. So, but that's what the government does, right? It's like, okay, well, just tax people more or just allocate more of the tax rolls to us so that we can keep on doing a bad job. It's like, okay, I don't understand that, but that's the internal logic. And that is, what business, like we talk about any of these things, but what business like has government appointed leadership and what business, can sign up for expanding like a roadway or something and then take years and years and years. Like, yeah, the government hires contractors to do the road work, but it's the government's responsibility. Like the Department of Transportation is the one that is responsible for this complete boondoggle, So it's just, I don't know, man. I could really, really rant on this for a long time. That really gets me fired up. One of the things I hate most in the entire universe is the United States Postal Service. So, like close friends of mine know, like, don't even talk about the post office. Even if you have a cool story, just don't even go there because I'll never stop talking about it.
Hey, it's terrible when there's a saying or a well-known saying, good enough for government work. I hear people say that all the time. I'm like, man, that's a lot of kudos to our government, like, geez. So finance has been in the news quite a bit recently. We've had the bank run, Silicon Valley Bank, and we've had the crypto fraud that's happened recently. What's the answer to all of these? First question is, are they financial crises? And what's the best way to handle this?
Gosh. Okay. Yeah. I mean, big question, right? The thing that I would maybe say as a first pass answer is, there's some major systemic problems and it's maybe not even a good enough answer, but there's some huge problems with the banking system, the way that like money exists in the modern world. You might just discount me as a gold bug or what have you, but there used to be like real money, like physical things. There was a limitation on how much money could exist, and that's not really the case anymore. Once you introduce the printing press and you have paper money, well, that created a lot of distortions and, how much money is there really, right? Because if you can just print more, like what is the worth of each individual piece? The example I use in my book is slicing up a pizza into more slices. Everyone's heard that libertarian joke. If you've been in libertarian circles for a long time, Ben Bernanke walks into a pizza shop. How many slices do you want it in? 6 or 8. 8, I'm really hungry today, right? Like it's more pizza. It's not more pizza. So it's slicing up the economy into smaller and smaller pieces. It doesn't mean there's more economy. It doesn't mean there's more wealth in the world. You just printed more paper. And then, of course, the trend now is to go more into the digital space. And with a digital, completely non-physically based currency, like that becomes an even bigger problem. This gets into Bitcoin and, things like that, right? Is there a hard limit on these assets? What does that mean, et cetera? Maybe this isn't the right place to get into all that, but the banking world, as it exists, the U.S. dollar, since we're talking about, the country where I live, right? The U.S. dollar is heavily, heavily manipulated. And so the, new money enters the economy, and the people who get that new money first are going to get cheaper prices and things because the rest of the economy hasn't adapted to the fact that there's more money and that each dollar is worth less. So you have this kind of wave effect. And guess who gets the money first? It's the politically connected. It's the banks, right? And so you sort of have, you stop me anytime, man, but you sort of have this, this systemic problem, right? That's going to be true because that's how it's all built. And if there's any, specific topic like within that, I'm happy to get into it, but that's the core of the problem. If you want to solve a whole lot of issues all at once, it'd be like, get rid of the Federal Reserve, have an asset-backed currency. That's, solution 1 on the list.
It does seem to be problematic to print more money to solve these issues, to solve the issues of economy. You're talking about fiat currency and, that USD, the United States dollar, being able to be manipulated by, government officials, which, that's for sure. The system is definitely not going to work forever. It's definitely got to, it's got to change for sure. I guess my real question is the change that we're wanting, are we seeing the very bad efforts of our government and economy with the bank run and the crypto fraud? Is that signs of a terrible system? Would you say that's true?
Well, it's hard to point like just one finger because the nature of these things they just continue to get more and more and more complex. I forget the exact count, but there's like 63 financial regulatory agencies in the United States. And so Like if your stance is, oh, we just need more regulation, you're like, oh, okay, so 64 is the right number of regulatory agencies, right? 63 is just not quite enough. And so, there's that. I mean, obviously the huge players, Wells Fargo, Citi, Chase, people like that, they're going to love more regulation because they're equipped to handle it. They've got the lawyers, they've got, people in Washington. They're good. If the regulations get more complicated, they're pretty well positioned to absorb the extra costs that might be involved with complying, whereas smaller banks are not. And so you do have that element where smaller banks, like more venture capital focused banks like Silicon Valley Bank, they're kind of all in on one thing. They're new to the game. And so, some unprecedented changes. I hate using the word unprecedented, ever since 2020, but some unprecedented things start happening, and then they're not ready, right? Because they haven't been around for 200 years. And so what happens? They get absorbed into some of these larger entities, right? They took the initial risk. They funded these crypto, investments or what have you, and they just kind of get liquidated and turned into a new part of one of the bigger banks. So, is it the Fed's fault that Silicon Valley Bank failed, and was absorbed? I don't know specifically, right? Like I just can't point one finger, like I say, but the real thing that's going on is that, like, you've got 150 or 750 different major problems with the way these are set up. Like, all the regulatory agencies are doing something wrong. The fundamentals of the currency have a huge problem. And so it's all these things kind of coming to a head that leads to situations like what we're seeing right now, inflation being high, et cetera, et cetera. So that's not maybe the best answer, but like, man, it's just, there's so many things, and I don't want to eat up your entire podcast by making it a systemic chat on that.
No, you brought in some great color there, for sure. And, we can definitely move away from, the government and that sort of thing. I actually do want to talk about, your financial planning business, perfectspiralcapital.com, where I learned a new concept today, the infinite banking concept. Could you tell us a little bit about that and where it comes from and a little background on it, please?
Yeah, for sure. So the infinite banking concept, I got to tell you, Lee, like, I did not like the name infinite banking concept when I first heard it, because I thought, wow, that sounds like a get rich quick thing, right? It sounds like, oh, I'm able to generate infinite money, right? It's like, oh, I don't know. That doesn't sound very good. The reason that I got past that was because I heard of the infinite banking concept through, in my opinion, the best living economist right now, which is Robert Murphy. And, I've read lots of Robert Murphy's books. I'm just going to call him Bob, going forward here, but read lots of Bob's books. I've seen lots of Bob's talks. I've met him a couple of times, and I thought, okay, this guy's super, super, super smart. And he's like always taking great pains to make sure he's being generous to the other side of an argument, right? He doesn't just say, oh, I'm right and here's why. Like, he'll always go, what their position is, and here's the internal logic of what they're saying, the other side is saying, and here's the specific problem that I'm addressing. He's just so generous with his intellectual opponents. And so I thought, well, it can't be like some scammy nonsense if Bob Murphy is back in this thing, right? And so look more into it. Well, infinite banking concept is the idea that you can recapture the interest that you are paying to all these financial institutions, credit card companies, auto finance corporations, et cetera. And you can take that interest, those interest payments, and put them into an asset that you own and control. So you have to finance things through your life, cars, houses, etc., new furniture, whatever it is. You have to finance things in your life. That doesn't mean that you have to go get a loan from a bank or a credit card or what have you. It just means that you have to spread the cost of large purchases out over time. Okay, that's how this is. Whenever you spend a lot of money, you are trading the money for the thing, and then you don't have the money, right? So you have an interest cost for buying a large item or a large purchase, right? You do not get to also keep the money and earn an interest rate with it. You either have the money and you can invest it, or you spend the money and get the thing. I'm just going to say it's a car because that's, I think, the classic example here. And so, well, what if when you're making your payments, you buy the car and then you repay into, whatever your system. Well, what if you're paying payments into a system that you own and that makes money for you? Right. So what if you don't have to pay the shareholders of Wells Fargo whenever you finance a car, or Chevrolet Auto Finance Corporation, or whoever? What if you pay yourself? I mean, that's a very roundabout process. I'm making it simple on purpose, but the idea here, what the book behind me, for anyone that can see it, that's my book. There's Becoming Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash. Okay. And so Nelson Nash wrote that book in the year 2000. Certainly people have been doing some variation of this before then. And he was teaching this before the book came out. Eventually he was like, hey, I should write a book, but he was out there talking to people about it. And so what he espoused was using dividend paying whole life insurance contracts from mutually owned companies to do the financing, right? That is the best tool to implement the process. The process is IBC. The concept part is IBC, but it doesn't have to be a dividend paying whole life insurance contract. It's just that's the best way to do it. And so, I was completely enraptured with that idea. I completely fell in love with it and started doing it very, very small way personally myself. And, over time, I was like, wow, this is really good. And then over more time, you're like, wow, this is actually really, really good. I can't believe we aren't doing this more. And then you have you start with one policy, you have another policy, maybe you have another policy. Then I got into the industry and started teaching people because, I used to work, like we were talking before the show, I used to work in the retail space. And I used to tell people as a, middle manager in the retail world, my employees, I'm like, listen, you got to understand, if you use a dividend paying whole life insurance contract, you can do X and Y and Z, and it's so powerful. And of course, nobody cared, right? Not a single person ever implemented what I was talking about because I was our middle manager at a retail store. But it really, really compelled me, and I was using it. And so then when I get into the industry and start talking about it, it's it's the exact same thing that I was telling people before. It's just now that's also what I do. It's my job, and I'm trying to give the advice, and that's when people started to really listen. But so I'm part of what's called the Infinite Banking Concept Practitioners Program. There's only a few hundred people who are in that program in the entire U.S., and you can go to infinitebanking.org and learn more about that. But also on my website, my personal blog, you can read about it. It is covered in my book, Between the Lies, which is at betweentheliesbook.com, and it's 99 cents if you'd like a digital copy of that. But that concept, it's so complicated, and people make it so complicated. And I can sit here and talk about it for hours and hours and hours. But the actual idea is extremely simple. Becoming Your Own Banker is only 92 pages. And a big part of that is huge charts of numbers. Right? If you took out the charts of numbers, it's like a 65-page book or something. And so but I reread that book every year, because every time you read it, Nelson Nash had this kind of old worldly wisdom to him, right? I had the pleasure of meeting him really briefly once while he was still on the earth. And, he had this really wonderful way of describing things in a kind of like, a way that is so clear that he understands it so much better than you do. But he's not, like talking down to you, right? He's using metaphors. And then you go back and you're like, wow, that's an even better metaphor than I understood last time I read this book. And then you read it again. And you're like, wow, that's actually really, really good. So it just kind of grows on you. And so anyway, that's the infinite banking concept. It's just removing all of these other people out of the what Nelson would call the play. The life is a play, and there's a lot of people in the play, but nobody's playing their right parts. Everybody's trying to play their wrong parts, and it messes up everything. And so people should play their proper role, and that is to control the banking function in their lives. You shouldn't hand that over to Wells Fargo, Chase, Citi, any of those guys. You should control the banking function in your life. And if you do that, it's the most profitable thing you can do, in your life.
Wow. That's amazing. So my first takeaway, my first question here is, how quickly or how easily, how efficiently can I access funds using this method? I mean, is it a new static loan every single time? Is it a revolving line of credit? What is it? How does that part work?
Sure. Yeah. So, and this, again, it gets super complicated, and we can get into the detail you want to, but I usually liken it more to a line of credit, but it is kind of a unique tool in a lot of ways. So if you, as far as access to the cash value, what it's called a cash value in a life insurance contract, that is the amount that you can use. Okay, your cash value is going to be increasing all the time. It's going to increase every single day because you are getting older every single day. And what is the cash value? The cash value is the net present value of a death benefit that the company owes you in the future, right? Because it's whole life, meaning it lasts as long as you do, basically, they must pay you a death benefit at some point in the future. And so since they must pay you, like, let's just say it's $100,000 when you die, or they must pay your beneficiaries, right? They wouldn't be paying you. But because they have this obligation, there's also a present value. And the present value is, hey, if you'll stop paying premium payments and walk away from this, if you'll remove the obligation from the insurance company, we'll give you this much money right now. So the trick here is, how do we make the cash value, large and accessible pretty early on in the contract? So you don't have to wait. Like if you just go buy a whole life insurance contract right now, just from, a regular property and casualty place that also does life insurance, like your regular agent that you have for your homeowners or what have you, they'll sell you a whole life policy, and it's probably going to have $0 of cash value in the first year, and it'll probably have $30 in the second year. It'll eventually accumulate, but it might be 35 years before it's enough money to do much with. And so it's a series of techniques to, get that earlier in the contract. And so I'm usually seeing something in the neighborhood of like 50, 60, 70% access in the first year. But it depends on the person, right? Because it's life insurance, it depends on if you're male or female. It depends on how old you are. It depends on what kind of health you're in. It depends on what the budget is, et cetera. Like there's a ton of factors. And so I'm throwing those numbers out, and I'm being a really, really vague person right now because I don't know. The only way to get an answer like that is to set up a meeting with someone on my team and we'll tell you, what the access would be. But that's the kind of starting point. Okay. Because you bought life insurance, right? You spent money and you bought a thing. If you go buy a fridge, you have a fridge, you don't have the money. If you go buy a life insurance contract that's built the right way, you spend money on the thing and you still have money. And that's kind of weird. So, it's unique in that sense. But the way the loans work is, okay, I'm going to take $5,000 out of this policy. Okay, so I request a policy loan for $5,000. Well, they send it to me. my loan balance is $5,000 and it accrues daily. It accrues daily interest. Let's just say the interest rate is 5%. It's a pretty good guess based on conditions right now. And so 5% interest rate over a year. I'm not going to do any math like with a calculator while we're on the air together, but you take the total amount, 5% times the 5,000, and then you would divide it by 365. Okay, that's the daily interest accrual. That's how that works. But when you make a principal payment on this loan, let's say you pay $1,000 back. All $1,000 goes to the principal. And so then your daily interest accrual has decreased by 20% because you just paid 20% of the principal down. And the interest that's accruing does not get added into the loan balance until your next policy anniversary. So life insurance policy, your calendar year is based on when you start it. I don't know if that's maybe as far as we want to take that, but that's how it works, right? And so you have a lot of control over how much interest you're paying because you can make payments whenever you want. And as soon as you pay that $1,000, 2 weeks later, roughly, it's back in the policy and you can loan it again, right? So you can keep doing that all the time. Meanwhile, no matter how often you're accessing it, if this is a policy for my company anyway, this is not true of all life insurance carriers, but while you're doing that, you will earn a dividend rate. So the amount of loans you're taking and all that doesn't affect the dividend that the company is paying you for being a part owner of the insurance company. It's a mutually owned company. You own the company because you have a policy, right? So this is what's called, if anyone wants to look this up on DuckDuckGo or whatever search engine, just look up direct recognition and non-direct recognition. So the only policies I ever sell are non-direct recognition because that means that they don't recognize how often or how much you're using policy loans. They're going to pay the same dividend rate no matter what. And of course, dividends are not guaranteed, right? It is subject to the profitability of the company in a given year. But that's some of the fundamentals, man. I'm going to direct people to my book from there, right?
No, that's great. Heck yeah, they should. I mean, it's so interesting that this isn't that widely known. I mean, I've been a business person and was even doing finance for a while and never heard of anything of the sort, but it sounds amazing. It sounds like you've niched out a piece of the financial arena, if you will. But I do want to transition us to your home life a little bit. So you're currently a homesteader. And what I want to know first, though, is how did you grow up and did your upbringing influence you on being a homesteader?
Oh, okay. Good question. So I grew up in a small-ish town. I mean, we're not talking like a really small town, but Central Texas, like 15,000 people, something like that. And I don't know what the population was when I was born, right? Because why would I care? But it's a relatively small town. It's a college town. There's a branch of Texas A&M there called Tarleton State University. So I grew up in a town called Stephenville, Texas, if anyone's familiar. And that, we were just middle America kind of, smallish town living, there's a Walmart there. There's there's grocery stores and stuff. And so that seemed all perfectly well and good because I didn't know anything else. I've lived in the city. We've now lived out way in the middle of nowhere. My wife is from an even smaller town, had like one traffic light. And so that, we both sort of had that small town vibe with our upbringing. But I saw I bought into the whole lie of the city. Okay. And so we moved whenever I got married and we had our son. He's 12 years old now. We moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex and we moved around that area for several years because, the lie of the city is, oh, there's so much more opportunity here. and you're going to have all this money and you're going to be so happy and there's so many things to do. And like, that's actually not true for most people. Most people don't make the kind of money you need to make in order to really go do all the crazy cool stuff that's in the city all the time. Like, I mean, I don't even need to list the things that people will talk about that you just go do. It's like so much fun to live in the city, right? But no, we worked hard and I didn't make that much money for a long time. And so it's like, we didn't do any of that stuff. We just had a higher cost of living, higher property taxes, et cetera, when we lived there, right? And so you asked me about my childhood, and now I'm talking about later, but of course I knew that didn't have to be the case because I used to live in a small town, right? So you kind of know, like, well, everybody out there in Stephenville isn't paying these crazy high property taxes. Like, we were in Dallas County right before we moved out to the middle of nowhere, and Dallas County like jacked up property taxes while we were in our house there. And, our house is paid off, right? So like totally fine on a monthly expenses standpoint, but property taxes, right? It's that whole, like, you never really quite own your place because you still have to pay property taxes every year. You're still kind of renting from the government. And, it's real expensive. And a lot of Texas is that way, right? So it's one of many factors that led to us moving. But as far as like being a kid and stuff, man, I used to hate it. I tell you what, I really did, because I thought there's so much cool stuff in the world and none of it's here. And, there's all these backwards country folk that don't know anything about the world. Like I was the classic idiot, back when I was younger. I thought all the wrong things about all the wrong things. And so, I actually trained myself not to talk with a Texan accent because I had one, and I don't even barely remember having one. I can turn it on if I want to, but I don't naturally speak with Texan accent anymore because I was like, I don't like this. I don't like being from a small town. I don't like, what I perceived to be culturally backwards beliefs and all these things. And it was dumb, man. So I feel almost exactly the opposite way about almost every single thing that I'm describing right now, versus, being an adult versus being like, let's say 8 years old or what have you. It's just, so to say that it had an impact is like a huge understatement because I did not want to be any of the things that were in that space.
Yeah. That's so relatable to me. I was definitely one of those kids that, knew everything. I knew everything, and I knew how wrong everybody was, and I knew how right certain people were. And, I was much more wise than I am now when I was 15, 16, 17 years old. So that's definitely relatable to me. And what's also relatable is the full circle. Hearing some of those principles and values spoken to me that I disregarded as nonsense are very real, very valuable, and make me a better person. And I'm trying to bring those principles and values back into my life every single day, hoping they'll rub off on my son. And that brings me to your son. So you have an autistic child, and can you just tell us a little bit about what that experience is like from a fatherhood standpoint? How does it, when you wake up in the morning, is it normal to, is it just the same type of feelings that anyone else would have? Are you looking to do something different, a different strategy than someone that doesn't have autism? What's the experience like?
Yeah, man. And this is, there's so much there, right? So the first thing I guess I'll say is there are so many different like expressions of autism. It's almost questionable if like autism is even a useful word at this point. So, my son is like, he's not otherwise specified, right? He doesn't have Asperger's or like some specific thing. He's well, he kind of checks some of these boxes, and so yes, but it's just different for every kid. And so there's an element of that, right? Like, so I don't ever pretend to be like I can speak for autism parents or anything in that realm at all. But my son, like, his particular thing was more social. Okay, so we used to live in one of the places we lived when we were in Texas. We lived next to a similarly aged, slightly older kid in a suburb, and he would be out in the yard playing all the time, and it was cool, right? Like, oh, cool, we live next to another kid. Han, that's my son's name. He'll have a lot more opportunity to hang out and play and all that stuff, and it just didn't happen that way. Like, we would get Han to go out into the front yard and, try to get him playing with something that he wanted to play with in the front yard. And like, the other kid is like, wasn't even there. You know what I'm saying? Like, the other kid would come up and try to start a conversation and try to get him engaged with a toy or whatever. He didn't want to do that. It's like, he wasn't even rejecting it. He was just doing his thing. He was very solely focused on one particular thing. And like, that was it. And if you weren't doing that one thing and you weren't the thing itself, like, he didn't care. And so for a long time, like, Han was nonverbal. And it wasn't until we started to learn some different like therapy techniques and things like that he was even able to like vocalize anything. So if you want to talk about getting started in all this, it was like, well, we have no idea what his needs are, all the time. Right. And so, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Like, I don't know. And so we just kind of have to present things and kind of just trial and error our way through that kind of basic stuff. And so like, that's, let's just say it takes a lot of time and effort and energy, and, it could be a little exhausting at times. Are we having an impact? Are we making progress here? That kind of thing. And so we eventually got a test, because for a long time we didn't know. We just thought, okay, well, he's late to talk. And then it's like, okay, he's really late to talk, right? And so we got a diagnosis for autism, and from that point forward, it's like, okay, maybe we should enroll him in, some kind of program. Well, we didn't want to send him to public school, right? Because you get in a special ed classroom with 30 other kids. There's a teacher, maybe two teachers, and they're trying to keep up with 30, 35, 40 different special needs kids that all have a different special need, potentially or likely. And so, I mean, what is that? That's like, it's effectively babysitting. It's just like, get the kid out of the house and give them back at the end of the day. Like, that's basically what it is. You're not actually making a lot of progress in that kind of environment. So we ended up sending him to therapy, and we learned a lot of these therapy techniques, and that was a really, really good period of time for us, because he first started being able to like vocalize some things, right? And so he was in ABA, applied behavior analysis therapy, and my wife, she became a homeschool mom basically, and she was really engaged in all of those therapy sessions, right? And so she became like as qualified or more qualified than the people at the therapy center, right? In a lot of ways, in dealing with our son. And so that's maybe where I'm going with some of this. It's like, you've got to be the person for your kid, right? And so I was working. That was my major contribution, right? I could only kind of catch up at the end of the day before I went to work. Retail hours are real bad for this kind of thing, so I don't recommend it, if you have options. but that's what I was dealing with. And so the like person leading the charge was Lauren, my wife. And she mastered the material. She was advocating for them, getting them to adjust their therapy programs, all those things. But for me, like as a dad, It's like, cool, you know, he can communicate more. There's frustrations that you know, are not even fair to have. Like, I want to see him like doing more fun stuff, getting out, enjoying himself, getting to meet more people and all that. And like some of that was kind of off the table, and it's like, it's not his fault, you know? Right. But, just, we kind of settled into a thing. Like, I'm really proud and happy with where we have gotten to with him, and where he has gotten to himself, because that's really more the correct way to say that. You know, we're providing access to tools, and we're, you know, creating the environment for him to learn and stuff, but like, it's him, and he loves learning stuff and improving his skills and everything. And so, like, man, there was a phase of time there. I realize I'm jumping around topic to topic, but there was a phase where, like, and really this was years, that he could not hear music. Like, he hated it, all of it. Like, there's, you know, a very, very, very limited, we're talking like 6 songs that he could tolerate listening to. And he liked those songs, but like anything else, anybody started singing, you know, in any movie or show or any environment of any kind, like hands over ears, you know, like, please stop kind of stuff. And so, like, it was really hard, you know, just, and I think it was like an emotional maturity thing. As he got older, as he started to understand more stuff, it's like, okay, I understand like what music is doing. It's really hard to articulate that, I guess, but just all kinds of stuff, man. I can talk to, you know, kind of the point that we're at now if you want, because I don't want to make it like such a negative conversation per se, but yeah.
Well, I gotta chime in, and I gotta say, you have to be so proud of your wife, and so thankful and so grateful for your wife to show up like that. I mean, to stop what she was doing, to raise herself up to a position to know just as much about how to handle this special child that you guys have. I mean, that's extraordinary. That is exactly what was needed and necessary. And she rose to the occasion. And man, I bet you're so proud of her.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I always tell people like Lauren is like a walking encyclopedia, right? Like, she does this periodically. She's like, I'm going to learn about X, you know, and then she'll just like master that. I don't have that ability. Like, it takes me years, you know, to master some subject. But she'll just ingest, like, I don't know how she does it. Like, she Google searches a different way than me, you know, and stuff. Like, there's just a whole different technique that I don't understand. And so if I really need to know something really fast, it's like faster to ask her and let her research it, you know. But she's awesome.
You got a personal Chat GPT.
No kidding. She'll love that. That's a great compliment. I'll tell her that. But yeah, I mean,
hey, so what is it? What's the vibe like now? I mean, you're still working, you know, probably better hours than your retail hours. She's still home or being a homeschool teacher for your son. Are you getting to spend more time at home? And that time at home, how is it spent?
Yeah, man. I have designed my life to make more time to spend with Han. Okay. And I would tell you, like, I'm a big proponent, of self-employment and, you know, entrepreneurship and those things. And it's not just like, oh, control your income and make all this money and all this. Like, there may be an element of that where you can make a ton of money. That's great. I'd love for people to make a lot of money, especially people who value freedom, you know, human liberty. But that's not the main point. The main point is you're not, you know, a salaried person working 65 hours, 70 hours, 80 hours for some other person's business. And you're not like, you don't get to scale and grow that in your own way. It's just like, do your job, you know? So I have specifically over the last several years been working on creating a life where I can spend more time with him. Right. And so that's a big passion topic of mine, just, you know, as a side note. But yeah, I mean, so now like I roughly work like 9:30 to 5:30 each day. Some days I got to do a little bit later. Some days I take off earlier. You know, the guy who wrote the introduction for my book, his name is Luis Mises, and he got this from a mentor of his, but this kind of idea that I'm always at work, but I'm also always on vacation. And so like I get to have fun, right? And I like what I do. I really like, you know, working with the people that I work with. If I really don't like somebody, I don't have to work with them. You know, it's up to me. And if they don't like me, they don't need to work with me, you know, that kind of thing. And so like I go do events that I want to go to, and some of those people are clients, and like it's just a very laid back kind of lifestyle at this point. But yeah, what it enables is, oh, okay, we want to go do something and it's 2 or 3 hours away. Cool. I'll just not book any appointments today or for the next 2 or 3 days. Let's go do it. You know, I try to be, and this is like a parenting thing. You know, I know you want to talk about like how I was raised and stuff. This is a random memory that popped into my head. So my dad, you know, whenever we would go somewhere, like we're in small town Stephenville, we're going to go drive a long distance to get somewhere. Well, we got to get there. And so we wouldn't really stop and do anything cool and be like, hey, look at that cool thing, you know, on the side of the road, like some random little tourist trap or whatever. Like, never stop and do any of those things. And so I have always had the policy, as long as we've been a family, like, if you see something cool, tell me, let's pull over. Let's go do it. You know, because I don't know what I missed, right? Like I have no way to measure how cool it would have been to go stop and do those things, because we didn't do those. And so, I'm really taking us far afield to your question, but you know, like I go wake up on most days, it's me, go in there and, you know, get him out of bed. Hey, you ready to start your day? You know, we're going to have a great day today, that kind of stuff. And, kind of get him started. Like he still needs help with some stuff that like you wouldn't think a 12-year-old would need help with. And so there's stuff like that. In some ways he's like a little younger than 12. And that's fine, right? Because he's always making progress on these things, and it's always cool to see that. But, you know, get to hang out with him in the morning. We eat breakfast together every day. We lunch together every day. We eat dinner together every day, unless I'm on a trip, right? Unless I'm gone for a period of days or something. We all as a family eat all 3 major meals together. I'm not there for snacks. He does like some speech therapy videos and stuff when he has snacks. So like that's going on in the other room sometimes. I'm in the same house right now, you know, with Lauren and Han. And so there's that, but like, yeah, I mean, I see him all the time. I go get something to snack on or a drink in the kitchen. I see what he's up to, you know, get to see what homeschool he's working on. It's, you know, language arts mostly right now, but it was math for a long time, and he loves math. And I'll tell you something that I'm really happy with that I get to do is I do his nighttime routine stuff, right? And so like go lay down in bed and talk about his day, right? Because there's this mental thing where your brain latches on to bad stuff, and you really like overanalyze and think about the stuff that, you know, the mistakes that you made and all these things. And so those memories are typically really strong in most people's brains, right? Everybody does that. You think about it like for weeks, you know, why did I say good morning to this person at 4:30 in the afternoon, right? You beat yourself up about that stupid thing that no one cares about. And you do that to yourself. People do this to themselves all the time. And so the way that you cope with that, the way that you fight against that, is to focus on good stuff, especially before you go to sleep, because when you're asleep, that's when you do a lot of your emotional imprinting. So every night, again, unless I'm on, you know, a trip somewhere, it's, hey, Hon, what did you do today? You know, tell me about some stuff that you did that was fun. And so like, you know, I watched YouTube. I played this video game. I did, you know, language arts work, like whatever specific homeschool thing. And so just help him summon up some memories that are positive, like accomplishments that he had for the day and things like that. And so that's what I get to do. I get to kind of come in and be the cool dad, I guess. And, we'll play video games together and stuff like that. But I get to like help him reinforce the positives. And I got to tell you, man, kid's the happiest person I've ever met in my life. And it's like not an exaggeration at all. So either that's me doing a good job or it's just his natural temperament, but it's probably more him than me, But like, that's awesome. He'll literally, if he's upset about something, he used to just go, I want to be happy. And he'd just like snap out of it and stop being upset. It's like, what? How do you do that? That's great.
That's amazing. Maybe I should interview him because I think a lot of people would love to figure out that. You know what I mean? If I commercialize or sent out a commercial saying, hey, this kid knows how to make yourself happy instantly, people would listen. People would listen for sure. That's an amazing story. So, your wife, she has, really became who she needed to be for your son. You have really become who you've needed to be a great father. Is there any advice or values you'd like to tell to all the fathers out there on how to be a better father or how to be the best father they can be?
Gosh, man, that's a tricky one. I don't know. It's not tricky. That's not the right word. I would just say like, you've gotta like accommodate the fact that you have this other person in your life. Okay. So like if you're a new father, you need to like immediately, preferably before the child is even born. Right. But especially if they're already with you, like you've got to be accommodating your expectations in your life, and you've got to be restructuring things in a way that you get to be available. Like, I don't care what that means. You maybe you have to quit your current job. Like which is more important, right? Your job or your children. And so you've gotta work on building, your children into your life, your family environment and everything. So it's, obviously it's a bigger change when you go from 0 children to 1 child than it is from, 3 children to 4 children, but it's still a change, right? You have to do that because, everyone knows this like intuitively, but you're going to regret it if you don't. And so even if it takes a few years to kind of line things up, you have to learn a new skill. You have to come up with some entrepreneurial venture. You have to work on your passive income. That's another thing I harp on all the time as passive income. But like you've got to just get the ability into your life to do that. If you've already got it, then great, right? But make sure that it's not just an opportunity and that you're actually taking the opportunity and making the time and doing the stuff, and spending the time. So, that's my one big thing that I harp on.
To give yourself the opportunity to be a great father. So, Luke, thank you so much for being on the Dad Hat. I hope everybody goes out and buys your books or buys your book and visits your website, perfectspiralcapital.com, understands, how to gain some financial freedom, understand a great strategy to, limit your debt and that sort of thing. So, thank you so much, Luke.
Hey, thanks, Lee. I really appreciate it.